Hello, I didn't see you there. My name is Joseph, and this is Community and Civic Engagement's Citizens U-Chat. So, today we're talking about money, state, and Congress. Money is a very important issue for many reasons that you can probably understand. Let's start out at the federal level. Any bill that has anything to do with money or spending has to originate in the House of Representatives, which tends to make sense because they're supposed to represent about average of 750,000 people. There's a few districts that are really weird and go on the upper end and lower end of that, but about each representative represents 750,000 people. Because of that, you would expect that they know best about what to do with your money, since they're representing that amount of people. Yeah, money representation, you know, good old stuff. No taxation without representation. We all love that. Okay, so how does the government get its money? There are many different types of ways, but the most common one, for the federal government at least, is income taxes. Income taxes are generally known as a progressive tax. A progressive tax means if you're richer, they charge more. As opposed to a percentage tax, which just takes a certain percentage off of everyone. So let's get some examples up in here. So if you made $100,000 a year and say the tax was at 10%, they would take away $10,000 of that. And if you made $10 a year, the tax was 10%, we're still using income tax as an example, so they would take away $1. So when it comes to progressive taxes, it would be something along the lines that $1,000,000 comes off like a lot of money. So if we go by the same 10% example, they take $10,000 off of someone who makes $100,000. It means of someone who makes $1,000,000, they might take off 250,000, which is like a quarter of their money. It went up from 10% to like 25%, which is kind of what progressive tax is trying to do. So income tax. Income tax pretty much covers 93% of the money that the federal government gets. There's a couple other taxes in there. For example, payroll tax is also lumped into the income tax, but they're still taxing your checks. And so is corporate income tax. It's kind of still the same idea. But the last little 7% is picked up by taxes like estate tax, excise tax, and a couple other ones that are weird. Estate tax pretty much means when you die and when you leave your estate up there, the government slurps that up. Okay, so for a state comparison, only about 10% of states' money comes from income tax, which seems like a pretty big shift considering that's the federal government's bread and butter right there. So actually where the state government gets most of their money, surprisingly, is property taxes. It's the largest source of revenue for states and localities among tax-wise. We'll get into the other one in a second. But tax-wise, that's their largest source of revenue. This deals with gentrification and some, okay. So with the money of property tax going mostly to education, there are some issues that start to arrive because of that. For example, there's one with gentrification and people not being able to pay their own rent because other people are coming in and making the property prices go up and up and up until they're priced out of their own district. And then there's places where it's almost generation-long levels of poor, closer to Robinson County. So think of it this way: if property taxes are used for education, so it's a poor area, means their property taxes are pretty low, they're not making that much money, so they have less money to spend on education, so they got less money. So to that end, you then put that in the school has less money, they're not going to do well. If the education isn't that good, then the kids aren't going to learn very much and aren't going to be able to make high-paying jobs. If they're not going to make high-paying jobs, by the time they start buying houses and stuff, they're going to buy cheap houses. The land area isn't going to go up anymore, and it's just going to end up being a cycle of, well, education and poor and education and living in poor housing, which is kind of the saddest part about these areas, because it almost seems like it's inescapable until the point where people start saying, oh yeah, gentrification. But gentrification has the opposite effect. It then displaces those people. So then gentrification, when a bunch of richer people then start seeing these land areas and they're like, oh, it's only this far from this city. So they then tend to move in there. The property prices are cheap in comparison. They make it super fancy, so generally the white people want to live there. And then it starts displacing the community, then it starts to displace the community that was living there the whole time. It's really a very sad subject with very limited solutions, because as long as most of our property taxes end up going to education, it doesn't seem like it's going to be fixed. Okay, so off that sad topic, sales tax. There are some states that don't even have property tax, and they just charge a boatload of sales tax, which they can do. Again, states can do generally whatever they want as long as the federal government doesn't say no. So then, yeah, sales tax is just sales tax is just the tax when you buy something from a grocery store. It's that like 6.5%. They may have upped it to 5%, plus like a couple city sales tax points. So I think it was actually 7% a little while ago. It may have changed since then. I don't have to work in retail anymore, so I don't have to memorize that. So some of the other taxes. Severance tax, which is a tax on resources taken from the state. Car licensing, you know, that $200 to get a plate on the back of your car. Or at least that's how much it was for me. And then there is death and estate tax. When you die, the government takes a bunch of your stuff if you don't have any place for it to go. Most federal spending ends up going to Social Security, Medicare and health, and national defense. They account for, all of those account for 61% of the budget. Now, covering Social Security, the federal government has an agreement with the state government to cover Social Security. That shouldn't be a big shock to anyone. Check out my last video if you want to know a little bit more about that and some of the block grants of how the federal government deals with the state government. So down to North Carolina spending. So North Carolina spending, our entire budget and expenditures is supposed to be $10 billion. We spend half of that on health and human services, 30% on education, 10% on transportation, and 5% for justice and public safety. The rest is natural and economic resources. So we spend about $3 billion on education, and this has gotten us to be about 25th among all states when it comes to education, which is pretty good when you compare to the demographics of states. Like North Carolina, as a eastern southern state, does really well among that. There's not many eastern southern states that rank high among education, so good for North Carolina. Or we're probably like one of the highest there. But it definitely doesn't compare to some of the other states. For example, Massachusetts, with a state budget of $80 billion, they spend $7 billion on education. That's 70% of our budget they spend on education. That's a lot. And with that, that gets them the #1 education system in the whole entire country, is what they're currently considered. On the opposite end of that is Alabama. Their whole budget is about $2 billion. Their budget is a fifth of our state budget. Oof. They spend about $700 million on education. about 35% of their total budget goes to education, and that is 700 million. So does it come off as a surprise when they have one of the worst education systems rated among the states? Not really. It kind of comes down to a money game at that point. So there's a lot of talk about how presidents can deal with the economy and how they can do many different things. Presidents don't often do many things with money or the economy. I mean, they can pass bills and stuff that moves the general bureaucracy around and kind of create jobs by doing things like that, but they don't have the biggest influence on money spending in the economy. However, just as a little trivia side note, the only modern president with a budget surplus was Clinton, which may come as a shock. If you ever want to check out and see the United States national debt, the U.S. national debt clock is a website. You can end up checking out all the numbers. It's kind of depressing, to be completely honest, but it has a bunch of information that I feel like most people should check out at least once. So that is all I have to talk about money, state, and Congress. If you need to vote and you don't want to go to the polls, you can always register for an absentee ballot. I just want to warn you to be careful when filling out your absentee ballot, because it seems like there's going to be a high chance of tossing out absentee ballots. Make sure you fill out all the paperwork correctly. I think we still need a witness in North Carolina with an absentee ballot. So please make sure you're filling out all your paperwork correctly if you decide to do absentee ballots, and go out and vote. This has been Citizens U-Chat.